Okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome to tonight's Pillow Schmooz. It is Monday night, March 30th, and we will be having tonight. I am really excited about having Rachelle Fraenkel, who is one of Israel's top educators, Jewish educators that we have, are blessed to have. The Jewish people are blessed to have. She teaches mainly in Israel, but is all of her lessons go all over the world. She really teaches everywhere, and her classes are given throughout the world. She travels around the world to speak, and she's really made a name for herself as one of the premier educators on Torah out there. She is the director of a Halacha Institute, which trains women to answer questions. We'll ask her about that tonight. So I don't get the chance that frequently to speak to female scholars, Torah scholars, and I'm looking forward to being able to examine some issues that I'm sure are on everybody's mind. And if you have a question, so feel free to put it in the comment section. I'm sure this is it's a hot topic. Women's education, I think, at least in my opinion, although it's very firmly established throughout the Jewish world, I still think it hasn't come into its own. That's my own personal opinion. I think there's a lot more room for growth. I think there's a lot more room for status and an official entrance that's not controversial, that could be accepted by everybody. So I think that women like Rachelle Fraenkel and educators like Rachelle Fraenkel are really setting the bar for what women's education will look like and Torah education will look like in the future, forgetting about men, women, and gender issues, but just in terms of what the next horizon is for Torah education. So I'm very much looking forward to examining those issues. I'm also looking forward to speaking to her about how her advancement of unity among the Jewish people, which is something that we are so desperately lacking nowadays. It just seems that every single issue that can be divisive among our people finds a way to be divisive. And it shouldn't be that way. We should, it's been 2,000 years that we've been separated as a people, and we should be looking for ways to come together, not ways to divide ourselves. So I'm looking forward to speaking to her about that, about unity. And I'm also looking forward to speaking to her about lines. I think lines are very important, especially in halacha and especially in Judaism, and finding out where lines are crossed and where lines shouldn't be crossed, and what lines out there need to still be crossed. So I think that's very important, and I'm hoping that people will stay and listen and watch and really learn tonight. I think that tonight is going to be a lot about learning, a lot about maybe topics that aren't that don't make everybody feel so comfortable, and I think that's a good thing. I think that's the way I anticipate feeling, and I think that's great. Rachelle Fraenkel herself is just an incredible educator. As an educator myself, you can recognize just incredible educators when you meet them and when you see them and when you hear them teach. And Rachelle Fraenkel is a blessed educator in terms of her abilities to convey lessons and to convey ideas. So that's something also that I'm hoping that maybe she'll share a trick or two before Pesach, and in terms of how to educate our own children, our own students, our own families, especially in a year like this year, where a lot of us are going to be experiencing a different Pesach than we've ever experienced before. We're going to be surrounded at a much smaller table than most of us are probably used to. A lot less people than we're probably used to. I think that'll also be somewhat interesting for us. So I'm very much looking forward to having her with us, and maybe hearing some issues also on advice that she can offer to other educators and to communal leaders and to just families in terms of education, and especially in terms of women's education. There's always sort of an expectation on boys and on young men in terms of what they should be doing, but and that in terms of their studying. And that expectation doesn't seem to be there for women. I know as a father of 5 daughters, it's very hard to find the balance of what should be and what shouldn't be expected of our women. So that's something that I'm also very much looking forward to examining, and hopefully to get some insights when she joins us, which I hope will be any minute now. Last night we had a great show with Ambassador Michael Oren, and tomorrow night we will have the deputy mayor of Yerushalayim, Fleur Nahum Hassan, who will be with us, and that will be an exciting evening as well. So we have a great lineup. Wednesday night is Rav Judah Michelle, so that will be a very interesting evening. And Thursday night we have a special guest who I don't think anyone has heard of, but you've all seen her work. She works in the IDF spokesman's unit. Her name is Rachel Lester, and that'll be our lineup for the rest of the week. So looking very much forward to tonight. Again, if you who are watching have any questions that you would like me to ask Rachelle Fraenkel, so please feel free to put it in the comment section. I can see it. I have it here. I'm monitoring it. So and I'll be sure to try, at least in the half an hour that we have, to fit in our schedule. Truth is, I'm getting a little nervous because usually by now our guests pop in, so I'm a little nervous about why Ms. Fraenkel is not here. I'm going to try to text her. Let's see here. Okay, and let's see what happens. Still waiting, but in the meantime, I hope everybody is getting ready for their Pesach. And by the way, if you have any constructive criticism for the show, I'd be happy to receive it. To those that have sent in, I appreciate it. And for those that have ideas of speakers, so I would love to. This is sort of like a new idea for me, although this is our 12th show already. I definitely want to expand this, and hoping that this lasts past the corona, which I hope will end this week. And so that's something that I would love to expand this and keep it going. And I hope that people join in. I don't know if anybody's noticed, but I try to switch off different types of speakers. I try to have a political guest one night, and then a Torah guest the next night, and then on Thursday night I try to throw something different into the mix. Last Thursday night we had here we go. Here it comes. There we go. All right. Hello. Okay. Can we hear you? Yes. Okay. Very well. Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you. Before I get started, I like to do one thing every night, which is I like to make a shahakol and give everybody a chance to answer amen. So I'm gonna start off that way with a cup of coffee. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol niyeh b'dvaro. Okay. So I've been talking for a couple of minutes about a little about your background and about you as one of the top educators, I think, today in Israel, and how much we can learn from you. And I was hoping that you could give us a little bit about your background, your current position and current responsibilities, and let us get a picture of who you are.
It sounds like one of those introductions I'm not sorry I didn't hear. They usually just give you a feeling like you want to go home because nothing you can say will answer the expectations. So I was tremendously privileged that my parents made Aliyah many years ago. I'm the youngest in my family, And my parents that were born in Europe and in different ways escaped, grew up my mother grew up in New York. My father spent 10 crucial years in New York between 15 and 25. And in that time he got smicha and he got his PhD in chemistry. And they made aliyah from for the first day of Bar Ilan University. So from my father, it was Zionism was a kind of common sense, and from my mother, growing up in a Hasidic family, rabbinic family, I should say, it wasn't something she considered earlier, but she was willing to give it a try. And thank God, to this day, they're living in Ramat Gan, not so far from Bar Ilan. And so I had the privilege of growing up in Israel, which is a tremendous, tremendous gift. I was born many years after they made Aliyah. My siblings were born here, etc. And growing up here and raising my children here, it was just something. I don't know if I would have the koach to pick myself up from a comfortable life in New York and come. So I'm so happy they did it for me. Beyond that, so growing up in Ramat Gan and mostly in the Tilumi education, and today I live in Nof Ayalon. It's Shalavim. It's next to Modin, halfway between Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, with my family. Since we're all in quarantine, and not real quarantine, but we're not allowed out of the houses, so my kids are now doing a kumzitz in the garden. Okay. So we might hear some of the music, and as far as what I do currently, again, it's a tremendous privilege. I learned in a few of the Batei Midrash that were opened for women, Lindenbaum, Matan, Nishmat, and Bar Ilan University. And I am not from the first generation of the women that opened these places. I can say specifically Rabbanit Malka Bina at Matan and Rabbanit Chana Henkin at Nishmat. They, a little over 30 years ago, they were the first, and they had some hardships doing it. I came in with my friends as, almost a second generation. We had encouragement. For certain amounts of time, we had scholarships. There were Batei Midrash to learn it in already. So today, my friends and myself are in the world of women's Torah learning. We're teaching all over the place, and we are, the layer of the women that are now deeply involved in Torah education, as far as Batei Midrash. The credit goes to the ones that really started it. And I can only say, beyond it being a joy, and the fact that beyond it being a tremendous zchut and a joy, it's also my job, which is unbelievable. It's just, it's Birkat Shamayim. And specifically, I'll describe two routes. I work for two places. One is called Matan, and there I'm in charge of a small group of women that are doing advanced halacha study. And we just started the second class. So, and excuse my English, I said I was born in Israel, right? I was born in Israel.
You're doing perfect.
Okay. Perfect. So we're learning. These are women that say the first graduating class. Okay, they finished a 6-year program. So before that, they came after many years of Torah learning. There were Ramiot and Batei Midrash, and they teach Daf Yomi, and they have a variety. Some have a PhD in Talmud, and it depends from where they came from, what route they took. Many Yotzot Halacha, many Toanot Rabbaniot, other Torah educators. And at some point in time, it was very obvious that it just doesn't make sense anymore. That if there's a question, everybody in their own field, but if there's a question in Tanakh or in Machshava, so that's your field, you answer. If it's a Sugya in Gemara, if that's your field, you feel very confident in it. And then if it's, for me, if it's Tarat HaMishpacha, that's why I answer 200 questions a month at least. But if somebody will ask something in Hilchot Shabbat, I'll say, oops, I didn't learn it, go ask, I don't know, so-and-so. And it just didn't make sense anymore. If you're a Torah address for your students and for people around you, it makes sense to have a more well-rounded education. So in this program, for instance, and there are a few of those programs in other institutions, in Batei Midrash and in different places, and mostly around Yerushalayim, but a few of them, we learn Isur V'Eter, Shabbat, parts of Even HaEzer, Yom Tov, Avelut, a very, very full curriculum that starts with, Gemarot, Tur, Bet Yosef, Shulchan Aruch, Nosei Kelim, Responsa, today's Poskim, a full syllabus of what a person would learn in these fields. So that's Matan. And in Ishmat, it's divided into two. One is teaching the younger generation, mostly women that come after, if they're Israelis, they're after some kind of national service, Shirut Leumi, or a few go to the army. And they usually spend 2 years in Shirut Leumi and then a year in Midrasha, and then they go to, to university, whatever their route is. So it's teaching them, people that have, this treasure year, it's like a gap year, except they're a little bit older and much more mature, and giving them an experience of learning Torah in Bet Midrash, where of course it's not the kind of Bet Midrash where a person expects to stay 20 years, so they have all the time in the world. It's a kind of Bet Midrash where you have a year and you have to choose, and you're supposed. A lot of what we do is give tools for learning along your life, and of course there are people that come from overseas, America, Canada, etc., that unfortunately they all went home now with the whole Corona scare, but they're there for a gap year program, also studying, and there I usually teach Talmud and Halakha, whatever is decided during that year. And the other part that's it's always significant, and even more significant these days, is Nishmat started over 20 years ago a program called Yoatzot Halakha and Halachic Advisors, and they are trained and answer questions in the field of Nida, Tarat HaMishpacha, and the training is there, and it's both Torah training and also a lot of professional stuff, like medical things you should know, psychological things a person should know. There are many fields that have to do with it, at least so you could understand what you're doing and refer and recognize situations and help. I wish every rabbi in the world gets this training.
Right.
And there, just to finish up, most of my work as a Yoetz Halacha is done through the Halachic hotline, answering phone calls in certain times, and in the community, and people that have the number and approach and etc. And I'll say one more thing is around the Corona scare and everything that's happening around that pandemic. There's a lot of work all around mikvah and keeping mikvahs open, under what standards, what changes should be made. Women are very scared. There are a lot of authorities to stay in touch with to make sure that everything's okay. Even the fact that the rules exclude women, allow them to leave their house for certain things, it's a very big deal, and there's a lot going on around it. So that was a long answer for a short question. But
that was very good. That really gave people, I think, at least myself, a really round, structure of just not, okay, I teach and I study, but really what areas you're in. So that was very good. You're a full Torah scholar. what areas of Torah, I know you mentioned Taras Mishpacha, but what areas of Torah do you focus most of your learning and teaching on?
I don't know. I mean, there are some people in the world that could be described as full Torah scholars. Most of us can't even start saying full about anything as diverse and huge as what there is to learn in Torah. One of the things that's most beautiful and also an opportunity is the fact that that Torah always spoke in many languages. The people that are most intrigued or most passionate about Tanakh, about Gemara, about Chassidut, about Halakha, different fields, Jewish philosophy. And I think there's a bit of an advantage that women have here is that they're not really expected to cover the full curriculum. It's not like a lot of the women I know try to do a lot of it and to get the full scope, whatever. But often you'd find a woman that's amazing in Tanakh or amazing in Machshava, in just philosophy or whatever, and she would have a decent background in other parts of Jewish studies, but not necessarily, coming from the equivalent of 15 years of yeshiva study. And still, she has so much to give and to teach in her field. So looking around, I see women in a very diverse fields. The more classic was Tanakh and Torah, Chumash, and Mefarshim, but I mean in depth. Just recently, one of our wonderful teachers is in Nishmat and in Matan is Simi Peters. Now she's a scholar of, she wrote the book about understanding Midrash, etc., etc. And you sit and you sit in a simple shiur of analyzing parshanut on something, and you say, I've seen this Ramban 10 times before. I never really understood it. So a good teacher could do wonders in every field. The friends that learned with me have more of mostly we met in Batei Midrash that spent a lot of time on Gemara and Halakha. So some of my closest friends, that's their field. But really, you find people doing such diverse things. A lot of people go deep into Chassidut and into really, really the whole range.
And what do you like to focus on?
What I love teaching Gemara and topics of halakha that over the years I learned well. I always have a lot of joy of relearning and reteaching. On the practical level, I deal a lot with Tarat Mishpacha, and of course there are issues like Isha Ba'alacha, halachic issues pertaining to women that are something that over the years you get to deal with a lot. So it's also a topic I find myself dealing with a lot, even though I think one of the important things is not to let that be your Torah. Right. You sometimes get put on a shelf of, okay, so women's issues. Right. Torah is so much bigger than that.
Okay, great. All right, that's okay, good. Okay. Where do you advise women who have really never studied Torah before? Where should they start?
It really, first of all, it depends when you say never learn Torah, it depends what you mean. A lot of women went through a very thorough Jewish education, but never in their life opened the Gemara, for instance. So, okay. So that's one kind of thing. Another thing is a person that never had proper Jewish studies at all, or is new to the ideas, or is, going through some kind of process of learning and discovering. It's a whole different thing. I, really, the best way is to get a chevruta, is to get someone to learn with. Now, if there's something in a person's area, a shiur they can join, something like that, that's really wonderful. And the truth is, it wouldn't matter so much what the topic is, as long as you have a good teacher and a good chavruta. Someone, and a chavruta is a concept. A chavruta is that person that you can, first have a lot of fun learning with. The experience is joyful. And on the other hand, it's not easy. It's you break your teeth together, you argue a lot, you find your egos clash sometimes, you find you understand each other with words, without words. So a lot of times it's about finding a partner. And these days, there are tons of things available online. Again, this pandemic only exposed to us how much is out there.
Right.
And really there's so many things to do. So just a couple of months ago we started Daf Yomi again.
Right.
So I know many it was such a celebration around it, and I know a few women, Baruch Hashem, that finished Daf Yomi. I wasn't that I shouldn't say lucky, because what you need is Sitzfleisch, but not luck. I learned part of it, but not the whole thing. But I know many women that for the first time in their life learned brachot. I don't know how many of them are continuing in Shabbat. Some of them are. Right. But even once in your lifetime, this is such a basis of Yahadut. Once in your lifetime to go through Masechet Brachot, for them it was, and I know it from previously in my experience. It's eye-opening. It's such an experience, and they know it's just Daf Yomi, and it's not Iyun. It's only right. Touching on the topics. You understand that it's not even the real thing, but getting the feel of that, it was an amazing experience.
Right, that's great. Okay, great. And then many people are critical of women studying Torah. So how do you answer the critics that come around and either make light of your studying or say that you shouldn't study at all?
At this point, I just feel like asking you, what are they talking about? So if you explain to me more, I can. No, seriously.
I don't know.
If I understand better, maybe I could answer something.
No, I think it starts with the Mishnah and Sota, which talks about that tiflut and teaching. You shouldn't be teaching your daughters Torah Shabbat. I think it goes from there to where women should be only not chayevet in Talmud Torah. So they shouldn't be really being osik in there. They should be osik in other mitzvot that they are chayevet. And maybe they should just learn halacha l'maisa, never really delve deep. Forget about Gemara, but even learning halacha biyun. I think that there's enough criticism out there. We could go on all night, but I'd rather hear from you about how I'm sure today it's not. I hope at least you're not hearing as much criticism and as much pushback. But I have to imagine that at the beginning of your studies that you heard it a lot.
So I personally didn't experience much pushback. When we learn, for instance, topics of that pertain to women, like I said before, Isha Balacha. So first of all, I make sure that the issue of learning Torah doesn't come up as a first topic. I want to get to it after we spent a few months learning seriously, and there's plenty else, the Ptor Mitzvot Aseh Shazman Grama, there's plenty to learn before we get to that, and then sometime closer to mid-year we finally reach the topic, and one of the things that comes up is this understanding that there's a feeling like this discussion is passé. Not only saying the horses are out, etc., but here we are doing this. But the first thing I tell my students is, okay, wait it thus far so you experience Torah before you talk about it. But you can't be an amaretz about this. You must know that this is an issue. You must know all the poskim. You have to, and if one of you is convinced that it's wrong, so we'll part. Somebody else will take your place in Beit Midrash. It's okay. The thing is, even starting in the Mishnayot in Sota, we all know, because Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkenus was such a good copywriter, everything he said was even the phrasing is so strong that we can say כל המלמד ביתו תורה כאילו לימדה תפלות, we can say ישרפו דברי תורה אבל יינתנו לנשים, we can say there's a bunch of his statements that each one of them is so powerful. But nobody ever says it's a machloket in Sota. It's not only a machloket in Sota, it's a triple machloket in Sota that doesn't get determined, not in the Mishnah and not in the Talmud, okay? And we have to look first at the Rishonim to see what they make of it. Because in Sota, Ben Azai says that the father must teach his daughter Torah, okay? Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkenus says that it's terrible, okay? It's better not. And, En chokhmah laisha ela bafelech. Each of his sentences is so memorable. And Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, that's not in the original Mishnah, but it's in the Yerushalmi, in the Tosfot, etc., says the midway, that a woman has to learn the things that pertain to her religious life. Now, in the Mishnah, in the Talmud, there's no decision about this. In the Rambam, there's a very, very complicated way about it. We won't analyze the whole Rambam here, but he goes back and forth and back, very complex. And in general, it sounds like he's saying Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkenus, but in a very complex way, with all kinds of opening. The most famous opening is his saying, Rov nashim en datan litlamed, right? And the Drisha himself, a few generations later says, Rov nashim, and if a person says, I want to learn, she showed that she's not from Rov Nashim, and there's reason to help her, etc. And then comes the Chafetz Chaim that says the very, very obvious, that in a generation where women are, he says it's full of tiflut anyhow, but I'll say are becoming neurosurgeons, okay? Keeping the religious part of their life in kindergarten stage, or in even, let's say, a good high school stage, just doesn't make sense. If I have no argument with Bet Yaakov Hayashan and Mea Shearim, okay? Women there study about, I might not be accurate, but in general, 4 hours a day, 4 days a week, because that's what they need for that. And the rest of the time, they help raise their siblings. Akol beseder. But that's not most of our life. Most of the women you meet, they're becoming professionals. They're definitely becoming professionals if they're supposed to support Bnei Torah, but that's a different discussion. It just doesn't make sense that the core values of a person's religious life will stay primitive. So the Chafetz Chaim said that, and Rebbe Milubavitch thought it's part of Geulah. The doubling the potential of Torah learners in Am Yisrael. So at some point it becomes common sense. It doesn't make sense to argue about it anymore. It's more like sechel yashar. But that my pshat is that another person's either drash or worse. So
okay, I hear. Okay, so switching topics a little, and I appreciate that. Switching topics. Okay. You're a big advocate of Jewish unity. What do you think today is the biggest hindrance to Jewish unity?
I'm not sure I know up, and they cared, and they did everything they can to stand together, to show support. People said for decades things like that weren't felt. So on the one hand, I was saying, first of all, it exists, we saw it. And also everywhere we go, we feel a yearning for that. Meaning in our experience, it's definitely there, and we lost the ability to be cynical about it. And it's so easy to be cynical about machlokot in Am Yisrael. We're very good at it. And on the other hand, wherever we come with the message, we find from all different parts people chalishing for it. They're yearning for connection, yearning for less machloket, yearning for, or not less machloket, but just to have a mechubad machloket, a place where people could be heard, and that this connection and caring would have more expression in our everyday life. So you're asking, okay, fine, that's easy. Now let's find where the problems are. There are different lines of machloket, so it's very hard. There's no one answer that would fit different lines. And in Israel, there things that divide us politically, or things that divide us religiously, or things that divide us socially. Each one of these things have to be addressed separately as far as what's the core problem. But I'll share one experience I had in America, actually. It was a few years ago, a couple of years after the whole incident, and there was a community outside of the big city, okay, but in the East Coast, that decided to celebrate Unity Day. That's one of the projects we're involved in. And in order to celebrate Unity Day, they came together, all the communities in that city. It included a reform community, a conservative community, a reconstructionist community. I never knew before that what exactly that meant, and 2 Orthodox communities. All 5, and that's the full scope of the town. All 5 communities decided to have a Shabbat meal together. Now, it was 300 people, and there were plenty of points when they were planning it for it to explode. It took place in the hall of the Reform temple. There were questions. So many people, will they use a microphone? Won't they use a microphone? What hechsher, this hechsher, that hechsher? Will they allow a separate minyan in the property of the Reform shul? Tons of questions like that, and each of them had potential to stop the deal. And they invited us, and we were sitting with them, and people were saying to each other, I lived down your block for 15 years. I know you're Jewish, but I never stopped to say shalom. I never, you're from the shul, I'm from the temple. We never even spoke. And there was a pillar of their community that had passed away just a few months before that. And they were saying, if he can only see us sitting here together, he would, from the way they spoke, I understood how significant this was, and how this was not just a one-time thing, because it creates a basis. You break bread together. So at that time, I was very, very curious to know why this could work in this community. And I know many communities in the States and elsewhere that it wouldn't work. And it turned out that the rabbeim, or the rabbis of these shuls, of the whole array, synagogues, shuls, whatever you call them, they, not known to the community in general, for 20 years they were having a chevruta. And even though they come from very, very different walks of Jewish life, and they have great machlokot amongst them, they had enough derech eretz and enough respect for each other to meet regularly and to learn Torah together. And it's a place where the leaders could do that. I can imagine other places that the rabbi would be willing to do it, but he would be afraid that someone would hear that he has a chavruta with a Reform guy. Right. And I saw this in Boca Raton, and which is an even larger community, places where the leaders have a relationship, have an ongoing understanding, respect their machlokot, have some form of communication. We don't have to wait until some, Pittsburgh or some horrendous anti-Semite, doesn't tell the difference, and it forces us to stand together. When it happens there, it could happen also in the rest of the community.
Okay, that's great.
I
So
didn't really
I
answer your
think we're
question,
very,
did I?
no, but I'm gonna accept it anyway because we're out of time and it was a wonderful answer. So I'm gonna take what I can get here. But I greatly appreciate you joining us. This was a wonderful show, very inspiring, very eye-opening for me to hear your thoughts, and I have to assume for most of our viewers as well. So I really appreciate it. Just before we let you go, tomorrow night we have Deputy Mayor of Yerushalayim, Flor Hasson Nahum, will be joining us.
Oh,
And that'll be a special treat tomorrow night at the same time. And Rachelle Fraenkel, thank you so very much for joining us.
send her
I
regards.
really,
She's a wonderful, very, very impressive woman.
yeah, thank you very much. I will do that. We'll start off that way. Thank you very much, and have a
Okay.
very good night.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye-bye.